All right, our third presenter is Dr. Yolanda Young, and she will share with you what she has been doing in her history courses using the iPad, which is very different. And the intent today was to show you a whole range of things that we've been doing. And I will tell you, when we put this project together, the faculty have met regularly. We've done surveys. We're going to share some of that information with you. But one of the things that we learned and what was advised by the folks at Apple was to not set limits on the faculty, not say you have to use this technology in this way. And we didn't. We really did allow the faculty to use their creativity. And we had some faculty members who were a little nervous about using the technology and not knowing what to do with it. And actually some of the other folks who are part of the iPad project are in the audience, and I see a few heads shaking. And what was interesting is their concerns were put at ease by one of the educational leaders at Apple, because they said, you know what, give it to your students, tell them to help you figure out what needs to be done. I think you were also part of that discussion. And they will teach you, and then you'll become better accustomed to using the technology. So it can be something, rather than you teaching them, something that you discover and learn together. And I think that was very, very powerful for a number of our instructors. You ready to get mic'd up? Doesn't turn that whole thing off. I would suggest on the inside of your back. You want me to do it? Yeah, watch it. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, well, I can clip it back here. Okay. Oh, good. It's working. All right. Well, thank you for that introduction. So I'm Yolanda Youngs, and I'm in the history department, but I'm also a trained geographer. That's what a lot of my degrees have been in. And I mention that because as a geographer, we really like to go outside, you know. And also one of my specialty areas is field work, and in geographical field work, and I work in national parks, environmental history, and all that kind of stuff. And so for me, one of my exciting moments here with these iPads and the opportunity that Candy and the college have given us is the opportunity to take my students outside, right? So I have experiences and some thoughts, and I'll try to share that with you and show you some pictures and some other things about some things I've tried to do in the classroom, specifically with the iPads, and I've had some very specific goals I wanted to work with the students on, and then I really wanted to get them outside, right? So I've had all kinds of fun sort of moving these things around, and Candy and the college have been really accommodating as I've asked for various devices, and actually have our cart here, if you will. So I've got a picture of that. So, so I start off with kind of one of my, you know, things do go wrong with these iPads. But overall, I found it to be an exceptional opportunity, and I really enjoy it. Some of my research also is into mobile technology and something called situated learning, right? So I'm really interested in what is it about a specific environment, a specific place, right, because I'm a geographer, that shapes that learning experience for students, right? So one of the things that I'll talk about is when I used the iPads last semester, I used it for a nature, culture, and history course. It's an upper division undergraduate course. And we focused on doing something called repeat photography, taking historic pictures and then going out and finding those same places and taking contemporary images and some other things involved with that, and some landscape history. And then I'll also briefly talk about this semester. I'm using the iPads, but for a very different kind of class, and we're actually trying to build some mobile apps. So I'll talk about both those experiences. But to get back to the situated learning and what iPads can do, like I said, I tried to get the students to actually go outside. So this was one of our great moments, and we had a couple of these field days. And like I said, a lot of my training is taking students outside in groups, doing field projects, taking them in buses and vans and all that kind of good stuff. So I'm fine with the logistics of all of it. But when I've done this kind of course before, I've done repeat photography courses before, I would have to, you know, I've done everything from use Polaroids, you know, which that works, you know, at least it's cheap and it gets in the students' hands, to if they have a little camera phone, to sometimes we'll get digital cameras. But with the iPads, they not only have a camera, but they have all these apps and all these different opportunities that come with the iPad. So here you're seeing one of the experiences I'll talk about a little bit more here in a second, but these are two of my students, and you may recognize the location. It's in Old Town Pocatello. And I thought this was just a tremendous place to really talk about situated learning, because here we've got this, what I think, I really love the Old Town area. We've got these great historic buildings, and all of these buildings and the places tell stories, right? And these historic images tell stories. So what I do is I ask the students to go out. They've already studied these historic images. In the classroom, we go to a lot of digital archives, so we use the iPads to get online, and I guide them to specific archives and specific sets of archives that they may never get the chance to go to or they can't afford to go to. And we learn a lot about the town's history, and then we go out, and I've selected a few sites that they take these pictures. And so they take a historic picture, and they have it right in front of them in the iPad, and they can flip between that and aim up the image and take their contemporary image here. And in the process, then, they can talk to each other about lining up the image and making sure you get that correctly. There's a lot of really great collaborative learning that goes on, a lot of peer-to-peer mentoring in terms of how to use the iPads, as well as what might have been going on with the historic picture. And they learn to look at that picture and look at the landscape with a lot more detail, even if places they've seen tons of times. So it was a really nice way for them to really get to know Pocatello, and a place that they've probably seen lots of times and just really never thought much about. And that was kind of part of my purpose too. So here you see two of the students. You can't quite see what's on their iPads because of the lighting and everything in the daytime, but they're sort of aiming it at the depot downtown, the train depot, and trying to match that up to a historic image, right? So like I said, I felt that I had a really great opportunity here with the very town around me. I really love sort of that backyard field experience. And I'm also relatively new to ISU, so it's a great way for me as an instructor to get to know the place I'm living and working in now. So this is a little bit of the results of that work. On one side, you see the historic image of the Pocatello Depot, and then you see one of the students' rephotography of that. So they're trying to line it up just exactly as that photographer did, and then they talk to each other, and then when we go back, we do a debrief, and then they write an essay, and they compare the two. And it starts off with the students thinking, well, okay, so there's some trees on one picture, and there's not trees now. There's some really old cars there. That's not surprising. There's some new cars here. But it allows them to have an avenue to talk about, well, so when was that picture? And why were there trees there then, but they're not now? What has changed about what we do with the landscape or the town? And so that's been kind of a fun conversation. And then I also included a screenshot from one of the images on the iPad that student was working with. And one of the challenges I've found is that, we don't always have Wi-Fi, right? Because I took these things off campus. And so here I thought, well, I'm just going to have the students go downtown. They'll just open up Google Maps. They'll see right where they are. We'll do a little viewshed map. We get down there, and it was a big fuzzy image, right? So it also kind of challenged me to think about different ways to have the students use maps in the classroom, right? As Cassie mentioned, we have all kinds of really cool ways to move these iPads around, and I mentioned this in my talk because I use just about every way you can possibly imagine to move these iPads for my students. This is one of these really nice carts that we have that you can see the iPads are sitting in there, they're charging. When we want to add apps to them and they have to be, added to all the iPads at the same time, we can do that through this cart, and then the whole thing rolls around, right? So that's really great. If you're going down the hall, it's a big old cart, right? Not so good if you're me, scooting downtown, right, and then walking all over downtown with my students and meeting them, and sometimes it rains and it's cold and we live in Idaho. So this is a really great resource. I have a big Pelican case, which I've used these things before in my field work. They're wonderful. They're water resistant, and they can take a lot of beating, and they're really nice to take care of these wonderful iPads. And then I could just pack that whole thing up and move it along like it's a suitcase in an airport, right? So a little bit of what happens outside, right? But let me show you a little bit more of my experience with this first class that I taught in the fall. Right? So this is my Nature, Culture, and U.S. History course. And like I said, it's an advanced undergraduate course. And in the process of this course, I'm teaching them a course about environmental history in the United States. And they have a series of books and some journal articles and some other things they read. But I'm also very interested in teaching them about understanding changes in landscape and geographic methods, right? And so they have to kind of learn about these things, and they have to learn about them through themes that I've identified that are seen in our town and seen in the resources that we read about, right? So things like tourism, public lands, water use and irrigation, mining, urban, rural, and suburban development, railroads, transportation networks. These are all things that tell national stories about the United States and environmental history. These are all things that we can also see right here in Old Town Pocatello, right? So I'm also trying to teach the students to see things on a variety of scales, from sort of that local to regional and onwards, right? So this class involved, as with for all the instructors, you know, we have to sort of rethink our teaching style perhaps, and the kind of activities we do, and also develop a lot of new materials. So I've written a number of new lab manuals, or field manuals as I call them, and the students also use Moodle very actively, do digital field journals, and I provide these to the students so that they have a little sense of what's coming up ahead when we go out and work in the field. And I'm happy to talk about that later too, as if we have question time, right? So what I give them for, say, this Old Town Pocatello, I give them an image list, right? And we go and we view a variety of archives to give us a sense of digital archiving and historic imagery. But then I chose a few photos for places that I knew I'd already gone out and scouted, that we could find in Old Town Pocatello, the depot and the old Idaho furniture store, and looking down Center Street, and then a nice postcard of the Hotel Yellowstone, right? And so they were tasked with doing that and going outside to Old Town Pocatello, and you saw some of that experience there with that first image I started out with, right? But before we did that, the very first field day we had, I found, because I have taught this kind of course before in the past, that it's useful to do this in steps, right? If I were to start off and just take these students into downtown Pocatello, or if we were to go drive to Idaho Falls or other places, it's a little bit too much too quickly for the students. And one of the things I've realized is with this course, but also with the iPads, is to do less, right? 1 or 2 activities, as other folks have said today. So we started out with, our first day was a practice day right here on campus. Like I said, I love using the campus as my backyard for field work. And the site that we worked on actually is very good for the college, right? Because we've got our college headquarters over here, and then we've got the administration building. And so we met out in the quad there, and we had a nice little field day. All right, so I had the students, we were on campus, so the Wi-Fi is working. So I had the students open up Google Maps, make sure that they could locate themselves, and that sounds like a pretty basic thing. But I'm also trying to teach them to be a little critical in terms of information that you receive through mobile devices or online, right? And one of the things I'm always trying to teach my students is that, maps tell a story too. And, sometimes, not that they quite lie, but sometimes there's some inaccuracies, right? And so, they'll find themselves, that little blue dot is supposed to be recognizing where they are, and sometimes it was a little bit off. We would be staying there with a bunch of students, and their little blue dots would show them in all kinds of different places around the quad, right? And so we had a nice little kind of moment talking about, GPS receivers and kinds of things like that, right? Like I said, one of the great advantages of using the iPads for me is that it's just this really natural thing for students, or most of my students at least, to have this peer-to-peer mentoring, right? And they really do very much collaborative work. There's some stuff that I build into my course, but some things they were just naturally doing out there together. These 2 students, for example, I'd given them the assignment. I said, all right, we're going to go out, we're going to look at the administrative building. I've given you a historic photo of it, and they printed it off. That's what these students are holding here. And before you take your repeat picture, I want you to study this and make sure you really can line this up correctly so that you take that nice rephoto. And one of the students was having problems kind of seeing the edges of it, and she wasn't sure, if she should include this part or that part. And this other student just walked over and said, yeah, well, I see what you're looking at, and, see here, this is on the edge. And they ended up both standing up there and trying to help each other out with it. So it's really nice. It also allows me a lot of time to work with my students. Once I give them, the moment to kind of retake their photos, they can move all over, and I don't tell them where to stand to take that perfect photo. But it makes them really look at the landscape and really pay attention to details and do lots of what we call in geographic fieldwork some of these passive observation techniques. And then I could also move from student to student, right? So if some student need a little bit more of my attention, or sometimes, especially early on, they weren't quite sure how to use the iPads. Some of them had one of these devices before. It gives me some really nice time to work with my students in the field, right? And I can immediately look at their work, right? Instead of those, well, the Polaroids were good for that too, I gotta say. But, you had to kind of wait for those things to dry. But this is really nice because I can look at it immediately and give them feedback on what they're doing, right? And then we can meet as a group too and kind of coordinate and talk about problems that we might be having. So if things are kind of popping up right in the field, we can stop right there and work with it. And we can have some really good conversations as I move around and work with the students, right? And so if you went out there, and you might have seen my class out there, it looked like we were doing some sort of sculpture exhibit because, I had all these students all of a sudden that were standing out there doing this, and they were moving very slowly as if they were being choreographed too, So I had a couple of my colleagues that were up on the third floor, liberal arts, laughing at us, but the students really enjoyed this experience, right? They were very challenged by this, what seems so easy, right? Which was part of my whole idea here. So I said, I know, repeat photography, it seems so easy. You see the administrative building every day, probably, when you walk across campus, but it's a much more difficult task when you really got to think about it. And then you got to go home and write an essay about this whole thing. So it really got them very excited. They got over their tensions in that first day and their nervousness about working with this. And then we had 2 more field days in Old Town Pocatello, some of those pictures I showed you earlier. And it was a really fun experience, right? So that's last semester with, like I said, the class I was working with then. This semester, I'm doing something a little bit different, actually a lot different. Right? This semester, I was lucky enough to get the iPads again, and I'm working with my historical geography and national parks class. So like I said, this is right in my home area here. I'm a historical geographer. I work with national parks. My research is right now a lot of it in Yellowstone and the Grand Canyon. I'm working on developing a mobile app for Yellowstone, and I thought this would be a great way to work with my students. And the history department has a historical resources management program that specifically focuses on either historical GIS track, computerized mapping track, or a digital media track. All right, so this is a great way for me to train my students and give them the opportunity to create a variety of products and get those really hands-on experiences, work collaboratively with each other, and build their resumes for jobs, right, and other things. So for this class, the whole class is focused, of course, on national parks. We're talking about the United States. And it's, a big topic, bigger than you might think. There's 401 units in the national parks, and of course we can't get to them all, but we have these devices, right? So I've used these to do everything from, live action webcams. We do interactive mapping in the classroom. I bring a lot of apps into the classroom, and the students, I can distribute the iPads, and they get to use them right there. And then we critically talk about those apps in terms of, well, okay, that app is really interesting, but how does it work in terms of a piece of environmental history education or public education? What is it teaching people? If you could do it differently, what would you do, right? And so we had these really nice critical discussions right there in the classroom with the students, right? So their project this semester, and they're just about done, and they're going to have presentations in a couple weeks, which actually would love to have you come to, Candy, and Mark too, if you're interested, in other folks too. So what they're doing is their project is called the America's Best Idea, right? And if you've seen Ken Burns, the filmmaker, documentary filmmaker, he did the America's Best Idea, this great series, and it comes from a long lineage. That phrase, America's Best Idea, has been used for a long time to talk about the evolution of the national park idea. So I said, all right, well, let's take America's Best Idea 2.0, right? So now you're going to take it digitally, and you're going to start to work with mobile apps. You're going to think about mobile apps and start to develop them yourself. Some of the students were really very comfortable with this. Some of these students had never had an iPad. They don't have an iPhone. You'd be surprised. And they certainly never thought about apps for a park. And when they did, they thought motel prices, right? And I said, no. So that's why I put this slide up there a lot in my class. I'm like, no, you are creating a public and digital history app for education. You need to think about how you're going to educate the public. I don't want to hear about motel prices. Don't tell me about ranger tours. I want you to take some piece of history, and create digital history out of it, something that's going to really change the way people see the parks, right? And so the Park Service and lots of other companies are doing this already. So I have lots of examples I could bring into class, and I do that with the iPads. I load these apps, a variety of apps on iPads, and like I said, we bring in the classroom and talk critically about digital information and technology. So one of the ones we looked at was the National Park Service has a whole digital media section from their national center in Harper's Ferry, and they produce these nice digital apps. And so I show these to the students, right? And I say, okay, look at the design of that, right? Look at the usability of it. Look at the description, which I know this is a little too tiny for you all to read, but it kind of gives you a little bullet points, tells you what you're going to learn about it. And I say, okay, look at Mount Rushmore, right? The National Park Service came out with a national Mount Rushmore app that's a very different design, right? But still kind of aimed for that public education. And Yosemite has a very nice one as well that does similar things. It shows you pictures and places and a little bit of history, right? But these definitely are not curated by a person who's a trained historian, right? And that's one of the things that the students start to realize is, and now we're at the point in the semester where, it feels like a grad seminar. You give them a reading, which in our case is a digital mobile app here. You give them a mobile app and, oh my gosh, they're like, there's no sources here. I don't even know where's the record locator number? Some student actually said that this week. I was so happy. So what they're doing is creating these things, and here's what we've got in the lineup, right? So what I did for this particular project is I told the students, okay, and I gave them the whole assignment, and I won't subject you to the whole thing now, but if you want to look at it, I'm happy to share it. But I said, okay, you're going to create this app. I'm going to bring a bunch into class, created by the Park Service as well as created by other companies, so you can see it. We talk about them all semester. You have plenty of experiences. You brainstorm. And then what I want you to do is I want you to tell me, and we did this on Moodle, tell me one of your favorite parks that you love, just do that, submit that, right? And then based on that, and then I said, okay, and then also tell me one of the themes from the course that you think is really interesting. So they could choose from, and these are all things we talk about, we have other readings in the course about, the history of human-wildlife interactions, when we think about United States history, the history of seeing the national parks, so how does popular media, like pictures and photographs and postcards, inform environmental perception, how we think about the parks, history of tourism, right? And I said, tell me a park you love or you want to go to, and a theme from the course that we're already reading and talking about that you really like, right? And they did that. And then I put them together into groups, and I said, okay, so I'm a really big believer in students need to have an opportunity to make their own decisions. They don't like to be told to do the whole assignment, right? So they did have a choice. They get to say what park and what theme they like. And then I grouped them together by themes. And now they're working in teams. And they've been working in teams for most of the semester now. That all happened about the first 3 weeks. And they've been working together and talking about, okay, well, what park do we have to settle on, right? So if you really loved, I told them, if you really love Yellowstone, but everybody else in that group wants to do other parks, well, you've got to make a really good argument to them. Why is it so interesting? What story about environmental history can we tell with a mobile app about that park, right? So they agreed by consensus, and then they had to decide on what a timeline that was particularly significant for their topic. And now they're in the thick of designing and sketching out their apps and working on that. So like I said, that'll be in a few weeks. So we've got a group of students. These are groups from 4 to 7 students that are working on an app that's going to talk about the human-wildlife interactions in history in Yellowstone. They're going to focus particularly on bears, everything from the bear feeding grounds up to sort of new policies about bear interactions. There's an app coming out, or at least an app that they're going to design about Olympic National Park, talk about ways that the park has been seen over time through popular media. Another app, and these students have really gotten into this one. It's amazing what they have taken this to whole new levels for me. The students that are working on Grand Teton, they were interested in tourism and land management in the park. It's really close to us. Here's another beautiful thing about ISU. It's really close to us. These students on their own organized themselves over spring break, got in a car, drove over, made their own appointment with the Jackson Hole Historical Society Museum, went to the archives, were very well organized apparently. The archivist sent me this very nice long email about it. Got historic photos I haven't seen about the park, and I study this park, and they're putting all this into their mobile app. Right? So incredible, work that they're doing together, and I'm really happy with that kind of collaboration. And then we have another group that's working on Glacier National Park, right? So anyways, I'll stop here because I'd love to take some questions if there's time, but I just really enjoy working with the apps and particularly the iPads, and I hope I get this opportunity again. So thank you. Questions? Do I have time for questions? Yeah.
I'm just curious on the development of the mobile apps.
Sure.
I mean, your students aren't necessarily programmers. I'm just curious, do they have programs that are kind of a WYSIWYG editors or something for students to create the apps? Or?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, so I'll just preface the whole thing by saying it's the first time I've taught it with this, these apps too, right? So they don't, I decided this semester, and I may change this next time I do this if I do this again, but right now they don't have a specific program or anything that I'm making them use, right? What I'm asking them to do is create mock apps. So at this point, they're making, and I said, it's up to you how you want to do it. There are several websites out there that you can feed content to, pictures and images and text and whatever, and it creates a mock app for you for free, right? And so I pointed them in that direction because I'm very sensitive to students using any more of their money, for anything, right? And I said, you could do that. You could do a PowerPoint if you want. But at this point, I'm also trying to balance between, I want to teach them to be historians. I want to teach them how to use archives correctly and also to do a very professional and thorough interpretation, And so this semester I decided to err a little bit more on the side of I'd rather have their work be very nice interpretation of these parks that happens to be in a digital format, or it could be anyways, right? Also, I'm dealing with a lot of, it's a great course because it's across the university, and I have a great mixture of students from history and all kinds of different departments, but the history students are particularly excited about technology, but extremely hesitant. Is this going to involve an algorithm? I get that kind of question all the time, right? And, and I have the iPads, but they don't get to take them home with them. And, I don't have computers in the classroom. And so I was trying to pick my way through those decisions. So I may change this in the future and dedicate part of my time to teaching them the technology to build a mobile app, right? But that means then I can't cover, these really cool things about elk migration and bison herding, and all these other things. So, it's as with all these courses, right? It's a decision you have to make on content, what you can do. But yeah, currently I'm not making them work with a specific mobile program. What I'm making them do is model themselves after other apps. And they're also doing oral presentations and written presentations. They have to define every one of their decisions. Yeah. So things to think about. Yeah. Thanks.